Okay, here you go, Mike. Over to you.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. Thank you. I'm just setting myself up. I'm just going to change my focal distance here. And I'm going to go and find the screen I need to share with you. And there it is. Let me go share. Okay, I hope you can all see that. This is a masterclass, so my assumption at the start is that you know the basics of how to use our calculators. You know how to get from element to element, from sheet to sheet, using the tabs, in this case at the bottom of the screen here, or if you go into any one of these tabs at the top. These are all navigational aids. Within an element, there are sub-navigation to get to each individual sheet. So I'm assuming you know all of that. I'm also assuming that you know that the data entry fields are all the light gray fields in these sheets. So I'm not going to go through all of that detail with you. I'm also assuming you know how to insert and delete rows. But what I will is I'll go through this entire ribbon here and just briefly explain each function. And then those that I need to, I'll go into more detail and show you how they work. As Alistair said, we are going to be recording this, so we will make it available. Yeah, I hope we are recording. We are recording. Okay, great. So let's just go into it. Okay, obviously, when you open up our calculators, you know that you're going to have to start, because we distribute them out in a lockdown state, and we have to open them through our standard authentication routines. But in this case, it's all open, it's all authenticated, and you'll see at the top here, to get to the functions, you have to look for the Mantis Networks ribbon tab. You click on that, and then these are all the Mantis Networks functions available. We've got the start button, as I mentioned, that launches the calculator, authenticates the user. We've got sheet functions for insert rows and delete rows. Insert and delete rows, obviously, as you know, are only available in certain areas. You can't insert rows outside of those designated areas. Print sheet to a PDF, use that and it'll print to a PDF the current sheet. In other words, so the sheet that is open and being displayed at that time, it'll print to a PDF. It'll also place that PDF in the same folder that the calculator exists in. So if you have a special folder for a client, for instance, and your calculator's in that folder, then all of your output from the calculator in terms of PDF sheets, etc., will also go to that same folder. Workbook save as, very briefly, maybe a little bit of explanation around this, because people wonder why we've got this when you've got a file save as function. Because we use macros for all of these functions, we use programming for all of these functions. If you do the normal file save as and don't save it as an XLSM extension file, it strips out all the macros and none of these functions become available. So we've suppressed that standard Excel functionality and written a program that allows you to save the workbook as, you give it a name, and it automatically saves as an XLSM, retaining the integrity of the code. Insert logo. If we have a look at, let me just do a Control P, have a look at the printer version of any sheet. Just got to get this thing out the way. Hang on a second, we drag it right down. Okay, this year we got a logo at the top left right-hand corner. The program allows you to insert, change that logo, and place it. Let me just show you quickly. And place it on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. Just very briefly, we won't do it because it can take up some time. Is you select, you put a logo, your company logo will be in a folder somewhere on your desktop. You select that folder, and then once you do, you'll see in the file list here, you'll see a list of all the images in that folder. In most cases, in the client situation like you will have just the one file. and you click on that, it'll display it in the preview section, and then you decide to go right-hand or left-hand side of the header. Once you're ready, then you say apply chosen logo, and that will then go off, and sheet by sheet will apply the logo on the right or the left. It'll also clear out anything that's currently there. So in the case of this file itself, it'll remove the Mantis Networks logo at the top right, and if you selected to put yours at the top left, it'll then place your logo at the top left. Export workbook to PDF. That's similarly to the print sheet to PDF, exports the entire workbook, sheet by sheet. Again, it places that PDF into the same folder as the calculator itself. Filter data, I'm going to come back to this because this is a really neat little function, but I'll come back to it. But that allows you to apply filters on your tables where you've got multiple rows of data. We'll come back to that as well in more specific detail just now. Import data. We've always had an import data function where we've provided for importing from a data capture sheet, certain sheets, for instance, on ST Spend, okay, you're able to import from a data capture sheet into the calculator, or multiples of them, and then you can import from the capture sheet. So those data capture sheets, when you get them back from your client, for instance, or from a third party, you can then use this, you've been able to use this import data function to import selected sheets, and they'll select and import into that sheet. What we've got now is a new function, which is really the launch of this new version of the calculator, and that is import all data. I will come back to this in a few minutes as well, because this is really exciting. Import all data allows you to bring all calculated data in from a previous version. Up until now, you've had to do that firstly manually or sheet by sheet, but then all the data in the financial tab, for instance, and in the client details and all of that, you had to do manually. This function allows you to bring an entire user data content in from one version of the calculator to another. The only downside to this is that it's only from version 11 upwards. So if you've got version 10 points, I forget what it is at this point in time, and you want to import data from that, you won't be able to. You will only be able to do it from this version. That's programmatically impossible for us to go backwards in versions. There's a lot of stuff we had to do to the calculator to allow for this data import. So when we release version 11.1 or version 12 or 13 or 16, whatever they get, this function will be available. So that is the only downside to this. You're going to have to wait for a whole iteration of this calculator before you get able to use that import data version. Okay, create a report. We'll do this just now as well. Some of you may already be have been using this. What it does is that we have a template Word document in the library associated with each calculator. You download that from the library, and then you use this function. What this function does is it goes and grabs all the tables in the charts, charts sheet, for instance, that table, and brings that table and plugs it into a predefined place in the Word document. You have areas in the Word document where you can then edit your own text above and below each one of these tables, but it goes through this sheet and brings in each one of those tables into the Word document. Calculator instructions, okay. It's simply, that's it. It brings up a PDF version of the instructions into your browser, your default browser. You can download it from there to your desktop if you wish for later viewing. Government gazettes. These are all the gazettes and legislation associated to this calculator. In other words, this is the DTI. So we've got the amended COGP Gazette, we've got the YES legislation, We've got the 42496 extended, and we've got industry norms. These again, if you click on it, they'll open up a PDF of that file in the browser, and you can download it or view it from your browser. You can download it to your desktop for later viewing as well. All of these documents, just by the way, are available on our website under BE legislation. So if you go to mantisnetworks.co website and look at the top, you'll see BE legislation. All of this plus additional stuff is available in that website as well. Version log and version check. Version log simply links you to the version sheet. Now the version sheet is a chronological record of all changes we make. Every single change that is introduced to the calculator, whether it be small or score impacting or a completely new release, is all recorded in this sheet here. Maybe it's time I can actually just explain very briefly the structure of our version numbering. Version 11.0.0, you'll see that the version number is broken into 3 sections. The first section is the major release number. So in other words, this calculator, this is the 11th release of the DTI AG. So we've gone through major releases 11 times, and that would be for various reasons. New functionality that affects the entire calculator, excuse me, or things like that. The middle digit is any change, whether it be in calculation or legislation introduced or an error that we've picked up. And with that change, if it affects the score, is a middle digit. You'll see it change that. So 11.0.0, if we have any change that affects the score after this version, it'll become 11.1.0. The third digit are incidental changes like spelling mistakes or text or anything that doesn't fundamentally change a score is recorded as a third digit. Each time we make a new release, the trailing digit is set to 0. So 11.0.0 will become 11.1.0, and then 11.1.1, if we change it to 11.2, will become 11.2.0. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think the important thing here is when you're watching for the version numbering, you must take particularly note if it's the first digit or the middle digit that has changed, because that means that you're going to have to, before you go for certification and for final verification, make sure that the data is transferred to the latest calculator, the latest version. Version check, this is very simple. What we have is we have an online database that records the current version of every single calculator. And this little function here will actually tell you whether the calculator you're working on is the latest version or not. I'm just going to run it so you can see the output to that. It takes a couple of seconds just to go out from us into the database. Does the check, and in a moment you'll see here we got here version check. This is the latest release version. So you know that you're on the latest and you don't have to worry. Also, what we have during the start routine, after you press the start button, we've got a message as well. If your calculator that you're working on is not the latest release, it will tell you. So it's important when you start the calculator to make note of those pop-up messages. Don't just go and click OK. Just read them. Take a couple of seconds to read them, because we use those for quick and easy ways of broadcasting pertinent information. So make sure you check those, because if there is a later version of this calculator, it'll tell you there as well. It doesn't do anything than just advise you that there is a later version. Then the navigation is just very simply left and right. It takes you through sheet by sheet, each of the sheets in calculator. Okay, let's go back to create the report. I'm going to come back to import data as the last function. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to, let me do the filter data. So let me just go and find a sheet that's got some data in it, probably suppliers. No, it hasn't. Let me just go and put some data in here quickly. Let's just go here. It's very easy. I go, yes, I'm not used to this mouse. Yes. And let's just say no. Okay, right. Now, the filter data. Oh, two things I want to do. Sorry, before I do that, a function that is not displayed up the top here and is very useful is a sorting function. If you look on every sheet where we've got a table where there are multiple rows for data entry, okay, you'll see this little arrow in column A. If that arrow is there, that means the table, which it's pointing to, is, in other words, it's pointing down to this table, these headers here, it's indicating that that table is sortable. And if you go to the column that you want to sort on and you double click that column header, so I'm going to double click EME yes and no, and you'll see it'll sort the data below. It only does a to Z or Z to A sort. There's no other way of sorting. It's just a very simple sort. But you can do it on any form of data. You can sort on dates, you can sort on this, you can sort on anything. Any one of these columns can be sorted. You may have known that, but it's quite useful when you're trying to evaluate data that you've got. So I'm going to just delete that lot. We'll come back to that. Actually, no, I shouldn't have. Never mind. Let me undo that. Okay. I'm going to show you the filter now. Each one of the columns we can filter on. You'll go up to the top here and you'll either type in a series of characters or you'll have a drop down. It depends on what kind of data is located in the body of that table. In this case, okay, we've got a yes, no function. So I want to filter on, I only want to see the yes, the yes entries. So you select you make your change in this column here and this row here, and then you go and you apply filter. What that does is then filters out anything that does not match the whatever you put in the row above. And to reset it, it just returns it back to normal. A really good function, particularly you've got multiple rows and you want to start filtering. You can do multiple filters as well, so you can filter first on one condition, then go to another condition, filter again. It keeps on filtering whatever is available to you through that. Okay, right, let's now just get rid of that and have a look at the create report function. I'm just going to shrink this and go to my folder to show you. Here we have the master that I was referring to. If I open up that master, I'll show you.
Right, we're not seeing, we're still seeing the same.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll tell you what. It just suffice to say that it's a Word document. It doesn't seem to be showing.
You stop share and then choose that window.
Yeah, no, okay, I'm not going to do that. It might just disrupt too much in there. So in other words, just a standard Word document with some placement holders. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to create so let me just close that. Oh, come on. Okay, so I'm not going to create a report. So if I click on that, it tells me I'm about to launch a report writer. I say yes. It's now going to ask me to open up the master document. In this case, it's on my desktop. And it's under mic 3. And it's here. You double click on it, you open it, and then what it does, it'll go ahead and evaluate all of those tables in the chart tab, and it'll put them into the the Word folder. With these functions that do take a little while, this one shouldn't take too long, so it won't be too bad. Your Excel becomes unavailable to you, so you're going to have to just sit back and wait. So here we go. It says the document has been populated. Okay, it's been given that name, and it tells you where you can find it. And again, it places the output into the same folder as the calculator is in. So you say, okay, and then when you go across to the folder, you'll see that document will be there. I'm actually going to show you this because I think it's important, because we need to see that. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to reshare. Where are we? That there, okay. I'm also just checking with my facilitator to make sure that it can be seen. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, if I open up that. Is that Word document opening? Can you see the Word document? Is it opening?
No.
Okay. That's the problem when you're doing multiple things here. You're going to stop share and do a new share. Let me just show you this. Share screen. Word document. Here we go. Okay. Here we go. So this is the resulting Word document. You can put in your measured internet, your date there. But if you have a look through here, we'll see there are the tables that have been brought in. So you'll see here where we got insert text. That's where you can put in your own edited text. And so all of these tables have been brought in from the calculator. Okay.
Answer a question from the moderator.
Okay, I've got a question coming through.
The question is, can you put your own headed paper, your own headed document there, and can you edit the document once it's done? So it's a Word document, a standard Word document.
No, it's not. It is a standard Word document. Sorry, the question was, can you use your own template, for instance? The answer is no, because you have to insert bookmarks that are defined in the calculator to be able to bring that set of data in. If you have specific format of Word document that you want to use for all of your reports, if you send that to me, I will then edit it for you, and I will put in the bookmarks for you so that it picks up the right data. All you got to do is just let me know where you want the data to be displayed, what data you want to display, and I'll bring those tables in for you and send you back the master. Then you use that same master for all of your reports on all of the calculators. I hope that helps.
Can you just clarify where the master document is kept?
The master document, in all cases, like I said earlier, is in the library. You download the master document from the library when you download the calculator. So if you haven't downloaded it, just go to the library in the DTI amended CFGP, and under the generic, you'll find this master for the generic calculator. There is one of these master documents in every single folder in all of the sectors. All of the folders have a copy of the master. Okay, let me go stop sharing, go back to the calculator. There we go. Sorry. Okay, and we're back. Sorry, this is our first webinar, so we're kind of like learning all the technology that goes around us, and it can be daunting even for people like us who are so used to technology. It can get you. Right, I think now down to really what is the good thing now, and that is the last bit here, and that is the import data. And I've just got to warn you up front that depending on the speed of your machine will depend on how long this function takes to run. On this particular machine, which is an i5 where I think it's got 8 meg of memory, this function with the current data that we've got in a mock-up previous version takes 4.5 minutes to run. I've got a colleague who has quite a nice beefed up machine with a solid state drive. It takes half the time on that machine. So just be prepared if you have got an old machine to actually sit back and wait and let the function run. And in fact, I tell you that in the message. So if we started, it says you're about to import data. Depending on how much needs to come across, this may take a few minutes. Grab a coffee and relax while we do it. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to say okay. It then brings up the form. And this is the function that was always there. I mentioned earlier, this function here was always there and always available to us. It's this little button here that is the new one. So when you click that, what it's going to do just ahead before it starts, it's going to ask you, okay, go and open up and find and open up the previous version or the source calculator. And then what it'll do, it'll start bringing in. Now, I must say, it'll bring in all data that is user editable. So for instance, on the client details sheet, all of those gray fields where you put in your client details, on the financial tab, it brings in your turnover. It brings in all of those fields that are in the gray areas. It won't bring in anything else. It's just those. Also, just bear in mind, it automatically will overwrite all data in the calculator you're importing into. Not an issue if you're starting from a brand new version, okay, which is really what this function is designed for. But just bear in mind, if you happen to do it again later and your data has changed, it does overwrite it. So just bear that in mind and be very wary of that. But for its purpose, in other words, to bring data across from a previous version, it's perfect. It works 100%. So you go and import all data. Oh, hang on, before I do that, let me just close this. I'm just going to go, just to show you, on the scorecard, we have no data. See, none of the elements have got scores in them. Okay, so we're all sitting at a result of 0 at this point in time, 0 points, 0, nothing, non-conforming. Sorry, excuse me. Right, let's go back to the import data. Okay, I'm going to grab a coffee. The form is here, import all data. Okay, wish to continue, overwrite all existing data. Okay, it then goes in. Now I've got a calculator here. It's got some previous data in it. You may have to go and search for it. It depends how you work out and how you actually have your structures on your machine. But in this case, we bring it in. Okay, so now what's going to happen is that it's going to go through the entire calculator sheet by sheet, table by table, and bring the data in. It might look a bit messy. We are working on that, but suffice that the functionality is 100%. What you can see at the bottom left here is you'll see it'll tell you, okay, we're currently importing from yes employment sheet. When that finishes, now we're on to the yes absorption, and it'll go sheet by sheet. Now, like I said, in this case, this does take a while. So and like I said, it's about 4.5 minutes on this machine here. It's important to note as well, please, when you're working on the calculators, particularly in environments like this, when you're working between two calculators, don't do it over a network. Rather download and work on your local machine. The resources sometimes become too much, and the network, if you're working over a network like in a shared folder or shared drive, it can impact this. So I would strongly suggest that you have both calculators on your C drive on your local machine before you do any of these kinds of functions. And in fact, it's actually it's a good practice to have anyway, is to work, always download and work local. And then when you're finished, upload again into the shared folder. It does a couple of things. It does mean that nobody else can disturb you while you're working on the calculator or on the file. And I think that speaks for itself. Alistair, have you got anything to add?
Well, yes. This is a really important function that we've been working on for quite a while. And the reason it's important is because we are in Excel, and we made a strategic decision to stay in Excel. Obviously, the world is going online and everything's in the cloud. The trouble is, if you have software in the cloud, it sort of assumes that you've got a relatively low rate of change and a very large set of users. That's where the cloud works well. But we don't have that situation. We have an extremely volatile set of calculators. We've got over 50 calculators changing all the time with, in world terms, a very small user base. The trouble is, to make a change online, to make the change, you've got to firstly express that change in the language that a programmer understands it, which means you have a chain of command, because programmers don't speak English. They speak computer. So you've got to get the change to the programmer, but he's got to make the change in such a way that it's not impacting on the data you've already put in, because your data is in the online system. And that means the more change there is, the more you have to test that the existing data is not impacted or corrupted. And that makes it very hard. So you get into regression testing. So we decided that our approach to the market was to have our calculators up to date as quickly as we can. And so that had a consequence, is that you have to re-enter the data. That was the major downside of Excel, that we make the change, you've got to re-enter the data. That's what we've solved. So now you don't have to re-enter the data, the computer does it for you. So you just pull the data across. So this is a really big thing for our users. The single biggest objection was we were constantly making changes and people were moaning that they had to keep on re-entering their data. Well, you don't have to do that now. And this is a big change, and that's why it's a new version release. But I think that's what needs to be said. So it's unfortunate that we're in Excel in a way, because we know that the world has gone to the cloud, and we ourselves are in the cloud, and we have cloud-based solutions. But for BEE, we believe that Excel is generally best if you want to be up to date. And I'll give you an example of how things change. Just today, I learned that the ICT calculator, we got a letter from the ICT Council saying that disabled and absorption no longer had to apply EAP, demographics. Well, that's just been changed by SUNAS. Said no, the law is the law, and that has not been gazetted. So now we have to change that back. It's wrong, but we have to change it back. Now that in an online business would be a big deal. For us, it's relatively straightforward. And in fact, that probably wouldn't result in you having to change data, but it's just an indication of the volatility that we're living with in the BE world. I don't know if you've got anything you want to add, Mike.
No, I think that says it in a nutshell. So yeah, we're able to react very quickly in this way.
I've got questions, Mike, if you don't mind answering.
Sorry, let me just finish that. So we're able to react very quickly, as Alistair says. We can make a change and get it up into the library in a relatively short period of time. Sorry, we've got a question coming from the facilitator.
So does the import function for all sheets work the same when importing from the data capture document?
It's exactly the same. It's just an extended functionality. Sorry, the question was, does the import function from a calculator like this one work the same as the data capture sheet? It's actually the same function, but it's just extending to those sheets that are not table-based. And I'll explain that just now, just so that you understand that fully. So it's the same functionality, it's just it is extended to include the sheets like the financial sheet and the client details sheet and the SD sheet, all of that. So all of those sheets where you don't have tables with multiple rows, it brings in all of that data.
And then one more question, Mike. Can previous versions be imported into the current version? So for example, construction version 1.2.
No, like I said at the start, as soon as we put this functionality into a calculator, it is from that version onwards. So you have to wait. Unfortunately, you have to wait for the next iteration of that calculator before this function will work. And the simple reason is we had to define all of the fields that are going to be brought across. Now, that's all related to the version that we're in right now. For instance, in this case, version 11. Those definitions don't exist in version 10 of the calculator. So unfortunately, no, you have to wait for the next iteration. So it's from this point onwards is where it's going to be applied.
I can add a comment. What we haven't mentioned is that when we bring the data in, we just don't bring it in, we check it. Do you want to talk about the checks?
That's absolutely true, but that becomes more important when you bring in data from a third party, where data formats might vary slightly. For instance, in columns where it wants a yes or a no. For instance, you know, if a disabled column is the person disabled, it's yes or no. Some third-party software will have a Y or an N. What we do is on the fly, when we bring that data in, we convert that Y to a yes and the N to a no. The same with race, AFICW. It'll be, instead of African, it'll change it to an A. So that is the conversion rate. Calculator to calculator, it's not an issue because the formats are the same anyway. So although the conversion routine happens, it's less of an issue because in one calculator to the next, it's always going to be a yes or a no and not a Y or an N. Okay, so the data import has been completed. We can say okay. And let me just go. So you see here, all of the data has been brought across. Now we've got all of that data. The calculator is now up to date. It's exactly the same result as what the previous one had. If I go into, for instance, any one of these sheets or the financial, let me go to the financial tab, where all of these gray areas were blank before, you'll see they've now got data. I mentioned earlier about the tables and what data is brought across. So I've just said now, so it's these fields that we've had to define, which were not available to us in previous versions of import data. If I go to Ed and go to supplier sheet, this sheet, for instance, supplier sheet here, it's the same structure and layout as in the data capture sheet. So that's why it was, you were able to bring in from a data capture sheet all of these sheets that have these tables defined like this. Now, there is one function, sorry, excuse me, the next iteration of this that is coming out very soon. We're in final stages of quality assurance, and that is exporting the data. We will be announcing this hopefully in the next week. And the ability to export the data from the calculator back into a data capture sheet, the associated data capture sheet. Remember that each calculator has its own data capture sheet because all the sheets have to match what's in the calculator. So we were going to be able to export data to the data capture sheet. And that's very useful if you want to keep your data in line with what your client's data is. So you can work on your calculator and then export to the data capture sheet, pop that off to your client, ask them to verify, make sure the data is correct, or add data. And then they can do that, they can edit that, send it back to you, and then you can import that data again back into the calculator. That, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, is it from my side. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Like I said, we're going to be putting this up as a tutorial, and you'll get a link for that so you can share it with your colleagues or keep it for future reference. I know Alistair wants to come back in and say some stuff, so I'm going to stop sharing here. Thank you very much for your attendance. I do appreciate it. Okay.